There has been a lot of talk about Emoni Bates, and so today I'm going to give a rapid rundown on what to expect from him in his sophomore season. We're going to discuss what Emoni Bates excels at, where he needs to grow as a player, and how the Cavaliers can put him in a position to maximize his development. Running down the list of what Bates does well is pretty simple. This is not an exaggeration, he is one of the best three-point shooters on planet Earth. I mean, seriously, the kid can flat out shoot the ball. He's as impressive as it gets in this department. Emoni has a quick release, sometimes firing straight from the hip, and he can shoot over defenders with the hand in his face, it doesn't matter. Emoni also has that special trait where he's not just a steady, consistent shooter, but he's someone who can really catch fire. Like when he sees a couple shots go in, his confidence will balloon and all of a sudden he's burying three-pointers from all over the floor and no one can stop him. This game from last season in the G League, where he scored a career-high 38 points, was full of ridiculous three-point attempts that showcase how special of a talent Emoni Bates is when it comes to shooting the ball.
Emoni, front court to the left, another bomb, that one is good as well! Emoni Bates!
But after that, we start to run into some issues. See, Emoni has been such a gifted three-point shooter from the time he was in high school that he never really needed to develop the other aspects of his game. He was given the ultimate green light from a young age, and this led to the coaches around him taking kind of a short-sighted approach to his long-term development. His ceiling as an on-ball creator is probably a lot lower than what was expected from Emoni when he first entered college. Now things could obviously change, but Emoni probably doesn't have enough juice or athleticism off the dribble to be a high volume guy at the NBA level. And that's why Bates now is still playing catch up in terms of developing his fundamentals, especially his instincts away from the ball. Like I said, he has the shooting touch to do this, but he hasn't carved out those off-ball instincts, and so the pieces of the puzzle are still waiting to be put together. So here I've mapped out the things that I want to see from Bates next season with the charge. First on the list is that off-ball activity I've been mentioning. I think it's important that Bates starts to show true instincts for making himself available, and this means reading and reacting to the defense, learning when and where to cut, developing better footwork when coming off of screens, and something that gets overlooked, part of making yourself available is actually making other players around you available. So for example, one of the things you learn early in basketball is that if you want the ball, you better set a solid screen. Now this is a limitation for Bates because he isn't exactly built like a brick wall, but then again, neither is Stephen Curry, and he is one of the best screeners in the entire NBA. I know it's always sketchy to compare someone to Curry, but the thing that separates him from the rest of the universe is not only his gift for shooting, but his natural ability to create openings for himself. And again, a big part of that is Curry understands how to use himself as a tool to get his teammates open. You don't need to have the ball in your hands to create a defensive breakdown. For another example, you can check out this play where Max Strus causes two Indiana defenders to miscommunicate simply by setting a screen, and it leaves Darius Garland wide open. And tying this back to Emoni, I need to see more of this, setting screens and getting open. I need to feel assured that he is starting to solve things in his second season. Making it in the NBA is about far more than just having talent. You have to understand your role and the game on a deep level, and that's something that takes time for many young players. And so the next thing I want to see is, can Emoni do enough to be serviceable on defense, specifically at the G League level? Listen, I'd love to see Bates be an NBA caliber defender next season, but I think it's important to take this one step at a time and get to a point where I feel comfortable with Bates being out there against G League competition. Footwork is something that has really gone unnoticed in Emoni's development. He just doesn't slide his feet or move with the textbook fundamentals that should have been drilled into him during high school and college. I don't really know how this has gone unsolved, but it's something that needs to improve if Bates is going to be a legit NBA player, and starting in the G League is a good first step. He isn't a freak athlete, but Bates is 6'9" and has enough foot speed to be a quality team defender. I don't think he'll be locking anyone up individually, but shuffling his feet and being in the right place defensively would go a long way toward making him a contributor on this end of the floor. The last thing I need to see from him defensively is rebounding. Bates isn't a bulky player, but he has the height and length to reach out and grab rebounds. He actually averaged about 6 per game last season with the Charge, so I think there's a strong foundation for him to build on this skill. And so packaging all of this together, if Emoni can be a lights out catch and shoot threat with enough awareness to make himself available, while also being a stout team defender who maybe doesn't change the game with his defense, but can go unnoticed and chip in on the glass, then that's a fantastic outcome for a player who will absolutely help an NBA team at some point in the future. To me, this is the best path forward for Emoni, and I do think it's a realistic blueprint for him to follow. The last thing I'll be watching for, and the thing that I think would raise his ceiling the most, is can Emoni create anything on his own? I said earlier that Emoni's potential as a shot creator seems much lower than it was entering college, and I do believe that's true, but he's only 20 years old, and the fact that he can convert such heavily contested jump shots does make this worth mentioning. Now the issue is he doesn't have a quick first step or a superior handle. He hasn't been able to create much separation for himself at the NBA level, and he really didn't do it in college or in the G League either. Last season with the Charge, Emoni shot just 12 for 41 from 5 to 19 feet and just 46% on layup attempts. Either way, I'd like to see him take some subtle steps forward, especially at the rim, because you don't want this to be a situation where teams can simply run him off the three-point line and completely neutralize him as a scoring threat. Adding on to this, a little bit of playmaking would make a big difference for Emoni. He finished with more turnovers than assists last season, and in today's NBA, you want as many players who can pass, dribble, and shoot on the floor as possible. This goes back to what I said earlier, where I want to see Emoni start solving some things in his second season. So of course, developing into a more complete offensive player is incredibly important for Bates. Now let's wrap up and review everything we have. Emoni is a flamethrower from beyond the arc, but his off-ball instincts and ability to create quality shots for himself is still up in the air. He's a limited athlete who has some big gaps in his game at a fundamental level, but he has enough talent to compensate for this. A big question I have is, can Emoni transition from being a microwave scorer to something more consistent? Can he be a steady presence who makes a big impact in small minutes, or does he need to be a guy with the ball in his hands who is scoring 30 plus points to be impactful? If it's the latter, then that's a concern for me, as I don't think we've seen enough at this moment to believe Emoni's role in the NBA is going to be that of a high volume scorer. The best outcome for Emoni next season is taking subtle steps forward in all of the areas I mentioned today. He needs to look like a more polished basketball player without the ball and deliver a season with the Charge that is strong enough for him to earn an NBA contract. I think getting that standard contract next summer should be the goal for Emoni, whether it's in Cleveland or somewhere else. He's still a young prospect, but he will need to be pushed out of the nest at some point. Timing is everything, and I think a successful sophomore season with the Charge would give Emoni the best opportunity to leave the nest and spread his wings. I wouldn't expect him to be in the Cavs rotation this year, but I'd gladly be wrong on that front. Overall, I think Bates should be aiming to prove himself in the G League and look to take that next step forward by next season.
And scoop and score with the left hand, Emoni Bates.